By the way, the best way to buy a new motor, not a new motor, but a new to you motor, is to buy a crashed motorcycle. And when the front end is pancaked and the front wheel is part of the radiator, there's a very good chance that that engine was running pretty damn good. So in the world of motorcycles, an engine swap is fairly easy. If you were wondering what all is involved, well, stick around. It's a ZX6R. It's 2000. No, it's 99. It's a G model, actually. It's slightly different than the ZZR600, than the ZX6R, which was a J model, 2000, 2001. But basically all those bikes were more or less the same. So good compatibility there. If you're trying to get into motorcycling or you're a little handy, sometimes it's pretty cool if you can pick up a couple cheap bikes. This example here, the guy blew the motor. Someone installed an oil pump, water pump combination, and when they installed it, the shaft wasn't indexed and it broke off and the oil pump wasn't working. And for whatever reason, they kept driving it until there was catastrophic failure up top. I mean, it still ran and everything, but the journals were all peanut. So this is the old motor. It's, like I said, somebody put the oil pump in it and the snapped the shaft off because it wasn't quite fitting, so they decided to make it fit and broke the shaft so the pump wasn't turning. So I'm going to take these cams off and show you what an engine looks like when it's been run low on oil or without oil. So I'm not being too careful with this. It's a trash motor, but you can see the scoring on the journals. They've been running without oil. That one's not too bad. This one is completely destroyed. And this is a matching camshaft cap. That's all one piece. It goes on the top. In the workshop manual, it has the flow charts for the oil passageways and where the oil goes first from the pump, etc., etc. And I suspect if you look at the damage on this thing, it goes bad, 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 and pretty bad, but not as bad as the first one. I think the oil would probably come up on this side and then it flows down the camshaft, and so it's starved first there. And that's the same with top ends. That's why top ends go first. They start burning oil because the top end is the last one to receive the oil, particularly on startup. And you can see how long this thing's been running. I mean, without oil, it's just completely scarred. There's big gouges in the camshaft. And of course, underneath, it looks the same. To the point where these, there we go, just get the camshafts out. Because I'm just going to slap this back together. This is a parts bike, but only for, you know, things like the shims underneath, things like that. But you couldn't even get the shims out. I actually adjusted the valves on this and drove it like that after I put a oil pump in it, and it actually ran, but it was pretty rattly. It's but anyways, the shims will be good under there, and that's why you should always check your oil, folks. It's just trashed a completely good motor. Look at the scoring in that. Horrible. Anyways, otherwise the bike's in pretty good shape. It's got good tires, brakes. The cables are good. It's got 35,000 kilometers on it, which isn't a lot. And everything else looks quite good. Cosmetically, it needs a few things, but you know, overall, it's really good. Complete bike. And then I have a crashed ZZR 600 here with a good engine in it, 2007. A little bit different. They have stick coils in the new ZZR. And I've already swapped the motors in these. And got this one mostly complete, so it's looking pretty good back together. And oils and everything in it, got it running, synchronized carburetors, tuned it up, adjusted the valves, etc., etc. while it was out on the bench. It's a good time when you got it up on the bench and out of the bike like this, where you got good access. Take the valve cover off, adjust the valves, at least check them, and throw a new oil filter on, put in some new spark plugs, and do those things that are awfully awkward to do once this engine's in the motorcycle. So these bikes are good little packages. They got excellent brakes, perimeter frame, nice suspension, very adjustable up front, rebound dampening, preload, and same on the rear. And they handle like a dream. They go like a bat out of hell. They're quite light, and they're pretty reliable motorcycles. A lot of common parts with them. There's a lot in common they have with the ZX6R, which was made around the same year. So my point is, if you're looking for a cheap motorcycle, you know, to get on the road this summer and you're kind of handy, well, these things are available. You know, like a crash bike, you pick them up for $500 to $1,000. And, you know, the thing about crash bike is obviously it was running good because the front end is pancaked. And so that's an excellent sign that it was running good. And then the other one, I mean, you know, 500 to 1,000 gains. So, you know, and the other nice thing is you get to go through all the motorcycle and see what's wrong with, find out all the little defects, you know, if you got wiring issues or the swing arm needs to be lubed or the headstock bearings. And you come out the other side with quite a nice bike for under $3,000. And it's a well cared for, well maintained motorcycle that you can put many, many miles on and feel confident about it, just like a brand new bike. So Japanese make good stuff, and I highly recommend it. So these are pretty much the tools you'll need to do the job. I kind of like this bike for this reason. You don't need a whole lot. Take the motor out, so that's cool. Or do a lot of work on this bike. You need a set of needle nose pliers, maybe a snips, cut a few zip ties you find along the way. Number 3 Phillips, number 2 Phillips. You need a flathead screwdriver for maybe doing a little bit of persuasion. And you can get away with using just the Allen keys here, but it's nice to have the socket set. I got a 14, 10, 12, 8. I needed the 7 for the oil pressure light for the switch, and then a 10, and then a 17 wrench, of course, which is not here. Couple ratchets, long extension, short extension. Then you need a 17, 14, 12, 10, and I got an 8 on the end. And that's about it. Pretty simple tool set, all things considered. The only thing that's really unusual, maybe a little bit unusual, you need in the motorcycle world is a 36mm deep socket to take off the countershaft, front sprocket, the nut on there, and that's about it. Other than that, it's just elbow grease. It took me about 10 hours to get it back down, out, drain everything, swap it, put the other motor back in the parts bike. And if you got a parts bike, you should, you know, the best thing to do is leave them all together, because then they take up so much less room. Like a bike in a box takes up 3 times the space as a bike that's all together. And plus you can see at a glance what you got. This one was in a front end accident, and oddly enough, it didn't bend the front end, but it did bend the frame. And you can see how it's divoted in here. So it actually bent in the whole headstock, and that's why the tank's crooked on. So they must have hit like just square on. But anyways, this bike's all together. I did take the Hindle pipe and put it on this one, because this one is much quieter. It's a stock pipe. It's actually a catalytic converter on a carbureted motorcycle. That's the other nice thing about this, depending on who you talk to. I like carbureted stuff, and you can fiddle with it and get it running nice, and I like those. But anyways, onto the video. It's a pretty basic bike, nice bike, and yeah, enjoy. Hope it helps people out there if you're doing one of these. Seat comes off, keyhole pops up, put that on top there. Tank comes off, 2 bolts in the back, 2 bolts in the front. You lift it up, there's a petcock there, fuel line, turn the fuel valve off, drain the coolant. Usually the plug's on the oil, the water pump right there. Lowest point, if there's no drain plug, which there normally is, you can disconnect the hose. Be prepared, put the pan up close. It's going to sploosh out, particularly when you release the cap on the radiator. If you leave the cap on, it'll dribble out. If you take the cap off, it'll absolutely gush out. Disconnect the battery, especially the positive, negative. Next one's the carburetors. There's a choke cable back here, throttle cables, take that off. There's screws hidden back here on each of the boots, 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll have to also remove the fuel line from the back of the carb. If you need some more slack in these cables, if they're hard to come off, either there's always adjustment up on the throttle here, and I just took the whole thing off and gave myself lots of slack. although I'm not keeping this engine, I always put rags down the intakes. Always good habit. Just always do that. A good habit is when you take stuff off, especially if you're going to leave the job for a while. Just put the bolts back wherever you took them out. Next thing is the radiator comes off. All the hoses, top hose, bottom hose, line here. Drain the coolant out of this tank. Radiator fan. Don't forget all the hoses up top here. Mounting points. Speed sensor has to come off. Side of the sprocket cover. Older bikes have cables that go to the front wheel. Lots of bikes now have speed sensors, so take that off. All the hoses, bracket for the radiator, that comes off. All you need to do is take, next thing we're going to do, we're going to take the exhaust off. All the exhaust has to come off. So there's 2 bolts on each header. Up here, there's a bolt under the belly, holds it on. There's a bolt in the back, and then the whole thing comes off. Then we're going to take the chain off. Take that cover off, take the sprocket off, slide it out, and then the chain will slide right off. I'll show you. You have to take the shifter off. It's a bolt, 10 mil head on it. It's a 6 mil bolt with a 10 mil head. That comes off. Just let it dangle. The cover comes off. There's like 4 bolts, 2 underneath. It's got an 8 mil head on it. They're also 6 millimeter, but with an 8 mil head. Take a big hammer. Take the proper 32 mil socket. Different for all bikes, of course. You fit it over here. You gotta flatten out this washer in the back here with a hammer and a punch. And then make sure you get the socket on there flush. You'll need an impact driver, like an air tool. If you haven't got an air tool, what you do is you put it in gear, put it in first gear, put a block of wood through the wheel so it jams against the swing arm, and take a bungee cord and bungee cord the rear brake pedal so that it's on. Like take a bungee cord and put it down to the bench so it's on, and then you can take a big breaker bar and you can take this off. I would suggest putting a little heat to it, because if you strip this, and believe me, you don't want to strip it, you're kind of screwed. Not totally, but it'll put some hours more into the job for sure. So give it a little heat, little propane torch, get the proper socket, big hammer, put it on there, smack it with the hammer so it's nice and flat, and then prepare to take it off. Got it loose, take it off, and then you just slide this whole thing out. And then you can just slide the sprocket off after you loosen up the axles back here, get lots of slop in that chain. Then you don't have to break it. It's just one less step you got to do. Put the chain back together, find a master link if you don't do it that way. This bike's a little more difficult than others. A lot of others just slide right off because there's lots more room in there. But anyways, that's the way you do it. There's an oil pressure switch. This one happens to be for the ZX6 on the front of the motor. There's a pickup coils, which I'm going to take out. You can just disconnect them if you're going to leave them in the motor, of course, but I'm not. I'm going to swap them over to the other motor, because the new motor, that one is a ZZR600, and it's a little newer, so it has, I think, a little different pickups. And then there's the kickstand switch, the safety switch right here. There is a the speed sensor, of course, and then there is the stator wires under here. There's 3 stator wires that come out. They're either black, usually 3 blacks, 3 yellows, or 3 whites. They're right here. Those are 3 blacks on this one. So stator starter motor has a positive. There's always a ground somewhere on the engine you need to disconnect. And then there's these wires, like I said, oil pressure switch, pickup coils, and of course you gotta disconnect the clutch cable. And next is the exhaust, and that comes off. And then we're getting pretty close. There is a breathers that usually have to come off. This is from the top of the engine. It goes up here, and it's a vacuum actuated breather for the crankcase gases, and they get recirculated back into the airbox. If you want a fast way to undo the clutch cable, I can't do it when I hold the camera, but I grab onto the cable, I pull it out, and then I grab this at the same time, grab that, and then as I'm pulling it out, I snap it out and I pull it out. And first I index this little knurled nut under here. I get it so that the gap is pointing towards me, and then I can just remove the cable and then remove the other side. Gives me lots of slack. There, done like dinner, just like that. Next is the engine hangers, as you call them. There's one on each side on the top here, and then there's one on the bottom right back here, and then there's one way underneath there. So there's 1, 2, 3, and then one on the other side right there, and that's it. So on the back of these engine hangers, there's a bolt way back in. See, there's pinch bolts on these things. There's one pinch bolt there, and it holds it tight, and then there's one pinch bolt right under there. And what happens is the whole engine gets sucked to this side. You adjust the engine in place once you get the new engine in, and then the spacers slide over and it gets sucked firmly to the frame, which prevents any slop in the frame, and it makes it as tight as possible. It's one of the secrets why these bikes handle so well. Not only does it have a massive aluminum perimeter frame, but there's little tricks in it like that. This is a full-on race bike. It's not a GP works bike, but I mean, man, right out of the box, this thing is pretty much ready to go to the track. And jack the motor up. I got all the bolts out. You use one of these jacks. You can find them cheap, secondhand, Kijiji. They're like 150 new. You know, guys sell them for 20, 30, 40 bucks. They think they're going to work on their bike and realize you don't want to or don't have the time or whatever. These jacks are excellent. It's little scissor jacks. And anyways, just jack it up just lightly. Take the pressure off the motor, and then you can start lowering it and dropping that motor out. And plus it gets pressure off all these bolts, these hanger bolts, and so you get the hanger bolts out, and then it's just sort of resting precariously there. And then I'm going to lower it, and out it comes. Before you take this valve cover off right here to adjust your valves, if they need to be adjusted, take compressed air before you take the plugs out and blow all the holes out. Take the covers off the intakes, blow all those out, blow the exhaust ports out, and then take the plugs out and stick oil down each plug hole and down the intake and up the exhaust. Take the cover off and rotate it quite a number of times. Also, before you do that, oil all the cam lobes. Like, it doesn't get to the journals, of course, but it just gets everything lubricated and makes sure that, you know, everything's good to go. Even if you had it running before you stored it, like for example, check out those plugs. So the moisture's been getting in there, and you want to make sure everything's oiled and good to go when you pop this thing in. Put a new oil filter on while you're at it. There's no magnet on the drain plug. You can take the pickup out. You don't even have to take it out. It's on the side, but it is magnetic. And you can see this one came out of that motor down there, which is toast. And you can see all the filings that's been coming off the bottom end bearings on that bad motor. And it's a sure indication that there's wear on this. Not that I needed to look at the pickup, but just kind of interesting side note. See, these camshaft caps used to be individual, and a lot of motors, they are individual. They're not just one big piece like this. But what they do at the factory is they put this on the head, and then they line bore it, which is why these half moon shaped gaskets are here, because a big drill comes through here and it bores out the pieces when they're bolted to the head. And that's why you can't buy that separately. You have to buy the head, and it comes with that because it's line bored. So the moment you screw this, there's no bearings in it, and it's done. it's important to use the proper viscosity oil, particularly in trucks and vehicles in the cold weather. When the flow rates are thick like honey, then it takes a while for that oil to get up to the top, which is why synthetic is preferred in winter months in vehicles. However, in the motorcycle world, you can run a thick oil. They recommend 1040 because the flow rates are made for the summer months, and so the temperature is according and the flow rates are there. So, however, you know, if you have a vehicle, you should use synthetic in the winter. I'm not talking motorcycles, of course, but synthetics are some better for some applications, but not so good for others. So anyways, that's why top ends go first. Thought that might be of some interest. There we go. Got the motor in. Got the trick is to get this bottom bolt in, and then you get it on the jack, the front of it, and you can swing the motor up, and then it goes exactly where it ought to be. And then you can put the other hanger bolts in. And then you put the pipe on. And the best way to do it is you put the front on first here and get a couple bolts on and just get it held up, and then swing it up, swing the muffler up and attach the point back here, and then you can attach the belly mount under here. It goes into the oil pan. That's the best way to put on the exhaust. Don't forget to put in all the copper O-rings and put in new ones. So we're getting there. Got the radiator on, hoses hooked up, go through all the clamps, make sure they're all tight, even the ones that you didn't muck with. Just give them a little torque, make sure they're tight. The airbox is fun to put on. A lot of hoses in the middle and whatnot if you got a ZX6R, and then the screws in the back. The best thing to do to get these carburetors on is loosen off the screws almost until the clamps let loose, and put a little grease on each boot, and then you can force it on. There's the throttles cables to go on, and then the fuel hose. There's a choke cable in there, and breather hoses and whatnot that go around. So there we go. Motor's in, carburetors are on, coils, wiring. Just put some oil in it, coolant, gonna flash up in the morning. See how it goes. Took me, I don't know, probably about 10 hours. Not just on the motor. I did go for coffee and dick around and watch the internet and, you know, done some videos, and so I don't know, probably realistically about 6 hours so far. But I still gotta put the fairings on and all the niggly stuff. Go muck around looking for fairing bolts. The stator wire plug was different, so I did have to solder that and change the stator. So that's about it. Got her back together. She's running good. I did tune it up earlier on with the carburetors. I synchronized the carburetors. It had a miss on the number 4 cylinder. The plug was dead. I'm not sure what that's about, but got it rectified through yet another plug in there, and I think it was just fouled, and off it went. It started running really good. The pilot was a little plugged. You could tell it was faltering. The pilot and one of the carburetors, but you know, the gas goes so bad nowadays so quickly that even if you had a clean set of carbs last year, if you left a little bit of gas in there, then it really wreaks havoc on things. So if you ever have, you know, carburetors stored away or store your bike over the winter, just drain the carburetors, because it's that gas is nasty with the ethanol in it. But anyways, runs good. A few niggly little problems, routing issues and with wiring and that sort of thing, but other than that, it went good, and I think it's going to be a nice little bike. When the weather gets nice, I'll take it out and take it for a good rip and see how it goes. Anyways, I hope that you found that helpful. It's not a comprehensive video on doing the engine. You know, it's not a replacement for a workshop manual. Obviously, it's more of a supplement to the workshop manual, and yeah, give you a little idea of what's all involved and give you a little confidence to go for it and fix your own bike up. So hope that helps. Have a good day. Ciao.